public who were attending tonight. So welcome to, we don't have visitors at the Police and Fire Commission very often, so nice to have somebody here for a change. So everyone's here. I'll call the meeting to order. I think all the commissioners are present, as well as the two members of the public, and Brian as well. So I don't believe we have any unfinished business. Purpose of the meeting tonight is to talk.
Steve, do you want to do the minutes?
Oh, I'm sorry, Tom, you're right. We have both, I think Tom sent out the minutes from the closed session just a little bit earlier this afternoon, mid-afternoon or so. I don't know if everybody's had a chance to look at those. The meetings from the open session have been out for a while, and I'm sure everybody's seen those. So I would move approval of the minutes for the open session.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Has everybody had a chance to look at the other minutes, or do we want to defer those, or we're ready to go? I looked at them. They're fine. I don't have any comments.
I think we're good to go.
I skimmed them too. They're fine.
All right. Then I would move acceptance of the minutes for the closed session as well. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes unanimously as well.
Who was the second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Ann.
All right, the business for discussion tonight is the hiring process for the police chief. I sent you some information from GovHR, and we want to talk a little bit about what the process is. Before we do that, do either of the appearances, the public appearances, have anything they want to talk to us about, or are you just here to listen, or is there something on your mind?
Hi, Steve. This is Alder Christy Goforth. Nice to
Hi,
see
Christy.
you. I'm just here to watch. I haven't attended this committee meeting yet, so I thought I'd pop in and see how things operate around here.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Sure.
And good evening, everyone. My name is Calvin Barrett, and I am just a member of the public that's here to listen and to learn. Thank you.
Okay. I guess the first question is, is the response to GovHR something we discuss in open session or in closed session?
I would suggest that it's items that could be discussed in open session.
That's what I was thinking as well. I mean, this is not a specific candidate. So I don't think we're talking about filling a position. We're talking about more procedural sorts of things. So I would do it in open session. Joe, do you agree, or what do you think?
Yep, I agree.
Okay, then we'll stay in open session. Did everybody have a chance to look at the two things that Joe, can't recall Joe's last name, that Joe sent us?
I believe it's Joe DeLopez.
Joe DeLopez, thank you, Brian. First, the discussion outline, and then the kind of a one-page, 2 bullet point things that he thought we should be thinking about.
I did take a look. Where do you think would be the right place to start and talking through
Well, yeah, Brian and I talked to Joe and his colleague briefly and answered some very fundamental questions, the size of Monona, things like that. And then I asked them what input they wanted from us. And, one thing they're looking for, I think it's, as we talked about before, we think it's important to have some form of public input near the start of this process. And probably at the end of it as well, was my thinking, but definitely at the start of it. And so they want input from us, both on, how that could be done or what we're looking for. And in part that I told them that's going to be a question for them too. What can they do to, help us with this? And then second, they have a process where they interview or otherwise contact other interested, parties in the community or in city government, and they would be looking for our input on who they should be talking to in terms of, developing a position description. Just how do we answer the question of what it is we're really looking for in this position in Monona? So maybe, they had a couple ideas for citizen input. We can't, under current conditions, obviously have a in-face person-to-person meeting where the public has an opportunity to tell us what they think. So we have to do it a different way. One idea they had was some form of survey using SurveyMonkey or another online platform. And I'm not sure how you communicate that, maybe on the city's website or maybe a couple other ways of city's Facebook page, or alerting people to the presence of it and asking for, some response to that, and they could help us, or they could develop a survey for us to look at. We could figure something out. Another idea they had was getting written comments, kind of us developing a list of questions for the public and getting written comments to which we could respond either, in some written form or at a Zoom meeting or some other format to involve the public in us kind of answering their questions or soliciting their input. You could also have some form of a public Zoom meeting, I would imagine, Brian. I don't know if we've done that before.
Yeah. And then just a third way, and this is more so when we get a little bit further down in the process to the point of probably finalist candidates. One of the things that the city council had mentioned, and it was echoed by PFC members as well, as this idea of, since we've got a contract with the Nehemiah Center to help with some racial equity work, there's a great opportunity for us to piggyback between GovHR and Nehemiah to get input from the community and use both those organizations to help do some sort of public input component related to the finalist interview stage. And so that's something that I've had some conversations with Nehemiah about that this morning. And so we'll kind of brainstorm between GovHR and Nehemiah the best place for Nehemiah to get invested in this process as well, because it makes sense, since we're working with both these consultants, to make sure that we're using them to the fullest extent that we can.
Yeah.
We use Nehemiah to help maybe put the SurveyMonkey questions together as well.
To give some
in
input
conjunction with GovHR.
Yep, to give some input on the questions. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, does Nehemiah, because of their the prior meeting they had, do they have a contact list of interested citizens in Monona? I'm sure
they do, of people that attended our first listening session, and then they also have been making contacts out in the community since we've been engaged with them. So yeah, we would work with them to use that list of contacts.
Yeah. I mean,
Do
what
they
I'm
have another
afraid of,
listening session coming up as well, or no?
Not yet. We're in the process of planning when and how that would be. That'll be probably at some point first quarter of next year.
Okay, after the holidays and everything. Oh, okay.
Do you feel we've learned any clear lessons, whether it's from Nehemiah or other things that we've been trying during the pandemic, in terms of what have been effective ways or less effective ways to reach people right now?
Tough to say. I mean, because there really hasn't been anybody that's done an interview process with the community members via Zoom. The last, big search in the area was Middleton, their police chief, and theirs was completed at the end of December, early January, so pre-pandemic. So they were able to do kind of the community listening session. Let me back up. They were able to do their finalists, 3 or 4 candidates interview in like their city council chambers. Members of the public were there to listen, and they recorded it. Members of the public were able to ask a couple questions of each of the couple finalists. I don't know that anybody's done a search that's got that level of community involvement via Zoom yet. So, collectively, whether it's Nehemiah, us, or GovHR, we're all going to be kind of doing this, by the seat of our pants, for lack of a better term.
No, that's helpful, but I'm thinking broader experience too, just in terms of general outreach that the city of Monona has done over time. For example, I remember the surveys I've filled out over the years from the Parks Department or the city in general and things like that. So if we're thinking about a survey, how have our response rates been on those? Have we been happy with that as a way to reach a broad base or not?
I mean, it depends on the questions that are being asked. If it's park related or sustainability, we typically get good response rates. I'm not sure if they're to the level of like scientific standards, but we have some existing avenues that we can use there, but then also leaning on the networks that Nehemiah and other groups have put together to make sure we get more of a broader base of solicitation is something that, I think we need to be focused on.
Mm-hmm. I would say my gut response with the ideas you've thrown out, Steve, is as long as it's not too time consuming or costly, it's not a bad thing to try a couple different avenues. Surveys might be good for reaching the broadest base, especially if it's something we can push out and market pretty well. But those are probably going to be relatively closed-end responses and may or may not be easy to interpret. So something that's more open-ended, whether it's, more written feedback type things or Zoom hearings or whatever, doing a both end would be nice if we can.
My first reaction to the survey was like yours, Joe. It's going to be static. You're going to see some words that might not be particularly clearly expressed. I mean, when I fill out surveys, I frequently think nobody knows what I'm talking about when I explain it. And I'm also afraid you kind of put it on the city's website and you get a really small response because nobody knows about it. I mean, how do you reach people and get, more exposure to it? So Nehemiah would be a good choice. I think the social media might be a good choice.
And MESBA would also be a partner in helping us, get it out to the community as well.
Yeah.
What's the timeline we're on here?
We're still kind of fleshing out exactly what the timeline is going to be. We, tentatively are scheduling. We'd like to have the hire complete in the spring. I don't know that we have a month certain, like May versus April or anything like that. Because I think we want to make sure we think through this community stakeholder piece first and get that kind of right, and then that'll help kind of dictate the rest of the schedule in terms of. Once we get that input, then the job ad is finished and the brochure and the marketing material for the position, position actually goes live. And then, typically it's a 4-week recruitment period in which we'll accept applications. Then GovHR will kind of do the first review of the applications we get and then provide you kind of their summary of that. And then you select, for the first round interview, who you want to talk with. And then after that, we move into kind of the background checks of the finalist candidates that you'd be looking at, and then this kind of public engagement piece related to the finalist interviews. So, we're thinking probably, March at the earliest. And I think just given what we want in terms of stakeholder interviews, that might even push that a little bit into probably April, if I'm going to guess.
Okay.
One thing to think about a little bit too is how much is the early input going to affect the candidates that apply, or is it more recruiting that they're doing? It might be more advantageous on the back end for more of that input if there's any sort of connection with the community and the candidates. But I don't know I don't know how possible that is either.
And when you say back end, how?
Well,
the far back end is after we've already picked somebody. That's a
yeah,
little late,
I know.
So.
I just don't know. I think it's really important to get community input for who we're seeking out. And maybe that's just more for us in weeding through the applications and less for the actual job description. I'm looking through this outline that they sent and I'm thinking, well, that seems pretty, necessary skills, experience, management style. I don't know how important how much information the community is going to be able to give us in a lot of the questions. And in that case, I think the survey is important for broad reach in offering the opportunity for people to give some input, but I agree that some sort of meeting where it gives people the opportunity to talk is where you're going to get the deep information and the people that are passionate about, who we hire. I think everyone needs to have that opportunity if we can.
So maybe I'm trying to make sure I understand some sort of initial input kind of to figure out what attributes we might be looking for in a candidate. And then maybe once we've got it to a short list, at that point, we have the opportunity maybe for the public to do some deeper dives, if you will. My term, not necessarily. Am I on the right?
It just seems like at that point, we would be able to maybe have a better idea of what questions we want the public to answer for us. If we have a clear idea of who our candidates are, it might, having those two pieces close together would help us in choosing the right candidate.
If I remember correctly, GovHR did the Middleton hiring, and Brian, I think you were going to follow up with Middleton to get more insight on how they thought that went. You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, I did. They overall had, were very positive of GovHR. They, I think, had some, if they could do it again, the way in which they did that public outreach meeting, if you will, they would have handled that a little bit differently in terms of where they were involved versus how GovHR was involved. So there's some things that in talking with the city administrator there that I've learned, and I have in my mind as I'm working with GovHR and Steve's working with GovHR to kind of prod them in slightly different direction than perhaps Middleton went with their public input piece.
Did they do any public input early in the process? Because last meeting, I think we were mostly talking about more at the candidate stage.
Yeah, and I didn't get the sense that they really did. And I don't know that it was something that they asked GovHR to put a quote out for them. So I don't know that they did that. And I know when GovHR did the search for, I think it was Waukesha, Waukesha did not ask to have a public input component in their search. So that wasn't there. For whatever reason, they felt they didn't need that at that time. But we were very upfront with GovHR that, this is something that the PFC wants, this is something that the city council wants. So they're aware that this is a crucial component to this search.
Was the Middleton search controversial at all? I mean, when did that take place?
End of last year, beginning part of January of this year. I don't know that it was controversial. I think they ended up, their PFC ended up hiring an internal candidate, but that internal candidate went through the same review process that the external candidates did as well.
Yeah, I just think there's going to be more public interest in our hiring than Middleton. Waukesha, who knows what their thought process was. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I hope there's public interest. I mean, I really do. I really would like to have some significant communication with the public. I think I'm kind of leaning toward, I think you start with the survey, but I don't know that you end with the survey on the front end. I think you start with it, and then I would prefer to have some live component via Zoom or otherwise where I can just hear people talk and maybe a little back and forth about what they mean to get a better idea. The survey just is going to be sterile, and you'll get something, but I don't think it's going to be as helpful as some kind of direct dialogue with people who are interested.
Yeah, I completely agree.
I guess the question is it worth doing the survey, or is it too limited in what it's going to do? I mean, I can see at least the idea of doing a survey such that we could present the results at our public meeting or whatever other outreach we have as a way to set a baseline. But if we don't get a lot of information, or it's a little bit fuzzy or things like that, then we could end up at that meeting thinking that we could have gotten started on this earlier.
I think you almost need to do both, because you're going to reach different types of people. Some people who are going to fill out the survey are going to want to be more invested in the process, but some people are going to fill out the survey knowing that this is really the only amount of effort they want to put into providing input. And those that are going to want to show up to the Zoom meeting have for whatever reason, a more vested interest in the process. So they're going to give you more of their time and likely more input on, what their thoughts and feelings are.
Yeah.
I agree with that. And we can't go back and redo something. So I might err on the side of doing something that maybe it didn't show as much value, but we won't know until we do it. So I think we gotta give it a whirl and see what happens.
Yeah, I agree with that, Tom. I think that's a little investment of time and effort. If it turns out not to work out, so what? It's not the end of the world. So let's try to see if we can do both. And I think doing the survey first also helps publicize the fact that there will be a second component to it, and maybe gets a little more interest generated in it, rather than doing them independently or doing them at the same time. So how are we going to, who's going to come up with the kind of the survey text? Is that a GovHR, maybe with the assistance of Nehemiah project for us to review?
Yeah, likely GovHR will put together the template. We'll make sure that the PFC members see it. I'll run it by Nehemiah Center to get their input. And that'll, I don't know when that's going to go out. My hope would be that we can get that out before the holidays. We might have to keep it open until after the holidays, just to give people a chance to provide their input, and then we can kind of backfill the rest of the schedule after the survey is done.
Okay.
I'd note I've done a fair amount of survey design work for work. So I would be happy, if you're just looking for a volunteer to come into the process earlier, before it comes to the full PFC, or do anything over and above the group work, I'd be happy to volunteer for that.
Okay, thank you.
I nominate Joe to be in charge of the contact with the survey work, because I have no idea how to do it, and I've never gotten even close to such a thing. So that would be great, Joe, if you want to. I'll forward the GovHR folks your email, and let them know that you're interested and ready to help out with that process, and you'll be the primary contact if they have questions about kind of how that's going to work. So
yeah, sure thing. And Brian, is it your understanding like they'd probably have some sort of draft template already from other recruitments that they've done that they'd adapt for a first draft and take it from there?
Yeah, I'll ask them about that tomorrow.
Okay, great.
It's hard to know you're asking the right question, but you can at least catch when you're asking a bad one.
Another thing we talked about is, you know, identifying stakeholders that we think they should be in contact with. You know, who do we think they should be talking to in addition to the public components part of it, but who else should they be talking to?
Do you have a thought, Steve, on what types of groups or folks you think they should be talking to? Or,
well, I would, you know, I think they need to talk to somebody in city government, obviously, the mayor, or I don't know to what extent the council wants to participate in making their views known, but I think city government is one obvious one. The police department's another one. I mean, I'm not sure who in the police department it is exactly.
My understanding is when they've done these surveys for other searches, they have sent it to the department itself to get input from the officers. So that would be a component of information gathering.
They've
So
sent
every officer
that the public has, or is there anything more specialized about it for the department?
You know, I'm not sure. I can ask them that.
I kind of think I'd like to hear the views of all the council members on it. I mean, I think that, you know, this is a decision we're going to make, but frankly, they're more likely going to get blamed if we screw something up, you know.
As it should be.
People will assume they have more input into the process than maybe they do, you know?
Yeah, no, you're I think that's true. I think I'd leave it to them to what extent they want to express their views. I mean, certainly,
I agree.
Certainly, yeah. And the mayor as well. And so I think they want to talk to all the elected officials and then the police department. Do you think Wally has a role in this, assuming he'd be willing to talk to them?
I mean, I think he can give some perspective on his experience running the department. Yeah, if he'd be interested, you know, it wouldn't hurt for us to ask.
Yeah, if Wally wants a role, I'd love to hear from him.
Yeah, I mean, I think he obviously knows more than anyone else how the department worked and how it's working now. Okay. Anybody else that comes to mind that?
You know, I'd also say members of the public safety committee, because again, they interact with the chief on policy matters. So they'd, like the city council, they'd be a group that we'd make sure got a copy of the survey.
We also note, depending on timing, that public safety meets the last week of the month. So we obviously always toss the December meeting. So in terms of if there's any more, I could see that being a useful discussion point at a meeting if it fit with the process, but that probably wouldn't be until the end of January unless we scheduled something outside the normal cycle. But that may also help with sort of outreach to a degree. I mean, there was good public attendance at a number of the public safety meetings this summer. It's not as high the last few as it was then, but I think that created some awareness that we might be able to trade on as another opportunity to do something in front of the public if we find that helpful.
Okay. Okay, anybody else come to mind? Do you think Nehemiah Center has any advice for us in terms of who we might be missing in terms of, I mean, the public is really broad. I mean, are there other more narrow, you know, stakeholders that we ought to be talking about?
I did mention to them this morning, you know, this idea of a survey, and so they're happy to kind of spread it out through their, you know, network, at least locally. So they'll help with that.
I'm getting the impression, we're talking survey and we're talking about dialogue. And I'm more getting the impression that this making sure we've got certain stakeholders would be the dialogue variety, as opposed to the survey. I mean, the survey might be way broader based and go to way many more people, but I'm thinking that there be a dialogue with certain members of the council if they're interested, the mayor, members of the police department, Wally, and the public safety committee, at a minimum. Now, maybe there are some other community leaders, for lack of a better term, aren't necessarily in city government. And off the top of my head, I don't have a list of those people. But
do you think someone from the schools, like from the district? Just trying to think outside of the real obvious ones.
Makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. I mean, we'd also have a, there's a school resource officer, and so it's not like they don't have continued interaction with the police department.
Not that I want this to be a free-for-all, but we did have some protests in the community, recently, and I don't have a sense, were there any organized groups involved in that we're aware of?
I mean, locally speaking, yes, the Monona Grove School has a parent equity council, and they organized one of the marches this summer, and so that's a group that we would look to reach out to the equity council to, once the survey is crafted, they would be a group that would say, hey, please pass this amongst your members and anybody else that you think would be interested in filling that out, and then they could also be part of the dialogue, the Zoom dialogue, for lack of a better term.
Well, if you look at, to get back to Tom's point, if you look at GovHR's proposal, phase 1 is a one-on-one or group interviews they're going to conduct with stakeholders identified by us, by the PFC. So I think it's a little bit beyond the survey. I think that the input from the police department and the city government and other stakeholders goes beyond just pointing out to them that a survey is available for them to fill out. I think they envisioned a little bit more of a back and forth interview, either, as they say in their proposal, either a group or one-on-one interviews. So I can't imagine that they won't, have some dialogue with the mayor or the city council or the police officers, or whoever else we can identify. And maybe the equity council is a good choice. I think we need a different perspective than just the city government. We need to hear from people that we don't know ordinarily involved in the process, and give them, something more. I'm just afraid if we just limit it to the survey and some Zoom session, we're going to get not much participation by the public, and we're going to be underwhelmed with the response, and we're going to assume that the public doesn't care, they have nothing to say. And I think we have to try to seek out a little bit more of a differing opinion than we're used to hearing in order to get it.
I agree. And to Tom's point before, we can't backtrack once we're farther down in the process. So I'd rather make a pretty long list now and do as much as we can within reason, so that we don't regret that later.
Yeah.
Mike, going back to Ann's question or comment about the school district, we have a couple of school board members that live in Monona, maybe 3. I know 2 for sure, but maybe 3. We could involve them. Whether we would involve Dan Olson or not, I don't think he lives in Monona. I think he lives in Cottage Grove. although I'm not certain of that. But certainly the school is a part of the community, so maybe there's somebody there. And then back to this community leader thing, you know, a guy that comes into my head would be somebody like Chris Homburg. Long history with the city of Monona. He's been on the planning commission, locally owned business. Most of the business itself is not in Monona, but they certainly are. Chris is a member of the bank board, Monona Bank Board. And so, you know, maybe we pick out a few of those kinds of people and get them kind of involved as well.
Yeah, I mean, that I would put him in more of a business community type you know, role, and I think the business community does have a role as well. Do we have a contact at the Parents Equity group, Brian?
I know the police department does, so yeah, I can get that pretty easily.
Okay.
And I'm curious as to how many people from that group we would want to involve in it too. You know, is that a good handful of people that have, you know, maybe views different than mine, you know?
Yeah, I don't know how representative they are, or who they, you know, what base of participation they have, but you know, I think we want to be just inclusive and kind of throw it out there and try to put together a list of what we expect will be differing views and hear from them, you know, from them all. So maybe we could think about this a little bit and think about who would be an appropriate addition to the list. I don't think you want to make it too long. You know, we can consult with GovHR about what, you know, they're comfortable with in terms of having, you know, phone or contact rather than just a survey, and see how many they think they would be appropriate. At some point, if there's too many, it probably doesn't work very well. But I would think, you know, 5 or 10 different people. I don't think they want to talk to every police officer, but I think, you know, if there was a mechanism to have the kind of you know, rank and file officers pick 1 or 2 people to kind of be representative in terms of their views or comments, that would be great. I don't know if there's a good mechanism for doing that. We did do that a little bit with the fire chief search though. And so that seemed to work. So maybe we could try it with the police department too, and kind of try to limit the number of interviews they end up doing, but still make it comprehensive. Anybody else have ideas about who we should add to the list? Members of the public, do you have an idea? Calvin?
No, I think, you know, after listening to the ideas and the groups of individuals that you guys are considering, I think you guys are on the right track, and that you know, taking a collection of those individuals for their input for the position, I think is great. So I think you guys hit it right on the head. So great job, guys.
Okay, well, good. It's, you know, sometimes you miss the obvious unless somebody tells you, you know, wait a second, you forgot about somebody. But okay. Well, if we think of anybody after the meeting, we can always add that. But I like the school district. I like the parents equity group, the police department. You know, some member of the business community, I think, is valuable. And then the council and the mayor, of course. I think that's a good start with the public, of course, you know, in another capacity. I think that covers everybody I can think of. Do we want to, I think it would be valuable to have at least a brief meeting with the PFC and GovHR just to have them walk through the process that they envision and what our points of comment and participation would be. And, you know, we are ultimately in control of the process. And so we don't, you know, just hand it off and say, bring us somebody. So I want to have them kind of have a little dialogue with us about how this is going to work. And I think we probably want to do that fairly quickly. So the next week or two, if we can.
I agree.
Okay. Is anybody going to be gone for any length of time in the next couple of weeks?
Less than usual.
I'm not really going anywhere either. So, okay. I'll email out a few dates and we'll see if we can coordinate something with the GovHR folks. And so we'll talk to them about kind of how it's all going to work. The other suggestion they had is adding another representative, and this is all just, I think, for thinking about right now, is could we add someone outside the PFC to be part of the interview panel for semifinalists or even finalists. I don't know, we want to do it on finalists, but at some point where we're considering the candidates, should we think about adding somebody to participate in the process? Obviously, by statute and ordinance, we have the vote, so they're not a voting member, but they would be able to tell us what they think in real time and react to a candidate.
Seems like an idea that's worth being open to. I wonder if it's going to be easier to make a decision about that after we go through these outreach processes with the list of folks that we have. That may give us a better idea of what would work well at the interview point in the process.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I'm open to the idea, but I think you're right, Joe. We don't know who to fill that possible position with ahead of time. I think you know, the best case scenario is you'd have somebody from the public step up who would be interested and articulate and have a viewpoint that would really be worth hearing, and just say, okay, you're appointed, you're going to be it. And, you know, I don't know how else to go through a process of picking somebody other than you kind of know it when you see it, I guess. So maybe that's just something to keep in the back of our minds. And if we have somebody in mind that we think would be valuable, then we can discuss that later.
Hey, Steve, if Mr. Barrett has thoughts after this meeting, and you're under no obligation to have such thoughts, but just since you diligent enough to actually attend this meeting, should he email those to you or anything? I mean,
yeah, is my email address on the city's website, or is it, I don't know if it is or not. I don't think so.
Is it not?
I looked.
Oh, it's not?
It's
Okay.
not. I tried to find it.
All right. Yeah, it's, I would just use Brezinski, which is S. Brzezinski, at axley.com, which is my business law firm email. It's private, and it's the only reason I use it for this is it's the only one I ever check. I have another email address too, but I don't check that one very often. So if you use the business address, I will definitely see it.
Well, thank you.
If you think of anything, feel free. I mean, you haven't been to one of these meetings before, so things might come to you after we're done. So,
and thank you so much for providing that and considering my input. I will definitely be able to reach out, and I think that just goes to show the greatness of the collection of people that are in this group right now, where you are willing to take outside input, and I just am very appreciative of that. So thank you.
Yeah,
thank you. It's it's a changing. Policing is changing. It's going to change, and it is changing, and I don't know in what direction exactly. I don't think anybody does. Yeah, I think we really, I think we're committed to having public participation, and I'm kind of excited about it, and hope we actually generate some interest.
Might be singing when they burn you in effigy, Steve, but you know.
I guess I'm not too afraid of that. Yeah, I mean, in some sense, it's I don't know what kind of candidates. I talked to GovHR about how many applications they would expect, and they were thinking it would be in the range of 40, give or take. They also said that, I talked a little bit about the fire chief recruitment process spanning the beginning of the pandemic and how difficult that was. They said that they thought that was no longer a factor, and that they were perceiving that, if anything, there are more people thinking about changing jobs or willing to change jobs now. And so they've had pretty good response to advertisements recently. So that seemed like a positive.
So you're saying they promised us one round of interviews?
They were actually, my impression, Brian, was they were pretty confident we were going to get some quality candidates, but of course, what else are they going to say?
We'll do as many rounds as it takes. We've got all winter.
Yeah. Well, let's get them in here so we can talk to them, I think, is the next step. Christy, do you have any, ideas? What do you think are other stakeholders we should be identifying?
Yeah, I sent Brian a couple of messages. I was thinking the Monona Business Watch group might be a good starting point for getting a select pool of business owners. That's just one idea. They work closely with the police department. And then I mentioned Scott Groff is he's one of the guys that leads the Parent Equity Council at the school district. And then there's also the Black Student Union at the school district. If you want to get some younger voices and diverse voices, that might be beneficial. Yeah, I think, and maybe a pool of some retail business owners specifically, since some of them see theft issues often. That might be a good sector to target. But I did want to mention though, at the Nehemiah listening session, there was great participation. There were 74 people in attendance, and several people did mention that they wanted this type of participation option. So I think you'll be surprised that you'll get some pretty good public engagement.
Good.
Just a hunch.
Good. That would be great. Well, I think that covers everything I wanted to talk about. So I think the next step is getting GovHR in here to talk about the process and make sure we understand it all and approve of it all. I will send out some dates for that in the next 2 weeks, and I will also include GovHR, and I'm sure we'll be able to schedule something to do that. So I don't think we need any motions for anything we've talked about. So I think we're just
other than to adjourn.
Other than to adjourn. Is that a motion to adjourn?
I believe it is.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks Calvin and Christy, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Hey, I just want